Čitanje Svetoga Evanđelja po Mateju.
Slava tebi, Gospodine.
Tada će biti sa kraljevstvom nebeskim kao sa 10 djevica koje uzeše svoje svjetiljke te iziđoše u susret zaručniku. 5 ih bijaše ludih, a 5 mudrih. Lude naime uzeše sa sobom svjetiljke, ali ne uzeše ulja. Mudre naprotiv uzeše ulje u posudama skupa sa svojim svjetiljkama. Kako se zaručnikov dolazak otegnu, sve zadrijemaše i zaspaše. U ponoći odjeknu glas. Zaručnik dolazi, iziđite mu u susret. Tada ustadoše sve djevice i opremiše svoje svjetiljke. Lude pak rekoše mudrima, dajte nam od svoga ulja, jer nam se svjetiljke trnu. Ali mudre odgovoriše, nipošto, sigurno ne bi doteklo za nas i za vas. Pođite radije trgovcima pa sebi kupite. Dok su išle kupiti, dođe zaručnik, koje bijahu pripravne, uđoše s njim na svadbu, te se zatvoriše vrata. Poslije toga dođoše i ostale djevice i rekoše, gospodine, gospodine, otvori nam. A on im odgovori, zaista kažem vam, ne poznajem vas. Dakle, bdite, jer ne znate ni dana, ni časa. Evanđelje Gospodinova.
Slava tebi, Kriste.
What happens when people do not take seriously those things that they should take seriously?
Što se događa kada ljudi ne uzimaju ozbiljno one stvari koje trebaju uzeti za ozbiljno?
If a football player does not take seriously the game,
Ako nogometaš ne uzima igru za ozbiljno,
he is removed, he is kicked off the team.
izbacuju ga iz momčadi.
If a worker does not take his job seriously,
Ako radnik ne uzima svoj posao za ozbiljno,
he's terminated.
i njega izbacuju.
If a musician does not take his practice seriously,
Ako glazbenik ne želi vježbati,
he loses his position in the orchestra.
gubi svoju poziciju u orkestru.
What happens when people in the church
Što se događa sa ljudima u crkvi
do not take seriously the gospel?
kada ne uzimaju zaozbiljno evanđelje?
What will happen to them?
Što će se dogoditi s njima?
Jesus gives a gentle warning in this parable.
Isus nježno upozorava u ovoj paraboli.
In the time of Jesus,
U Isusovo vrijeme,
in Palestine,
u Palestini,
when there would be a wedding,
kada bi se spremala svadba,
it would be about this time of year.
bilo bi to upravo nekako u ovo doba godine.
Late in the fall, after the harvest.
Dakle, kasno u jesen, nakon žetve.
A wedding would take place in the evening, at night.
A svadba bi bila obično uveče.
The day of the wedding, the bride would be prepared.
U vrijeme svadbe, na dan svadbe, mlada bi bila spremna.
Late in the day, the groom and his family
Dakle, kasnije u danu mladoženja i njegova obitelj
would begin negotiating with the bride's father.
počeli bi pregovarati sa ocem od mlade.
And they would negotiate and write a contract.
Pregovarali bi i onda bi napisali ugovor.
In Hebrew, it's called a ketubah.
Na hebrejskom ugovor je ketuva.
If you have Jewish friends,
Ako imate slučajno židovske prijatelje,
usually in a Jewish home, the ketubah is framed and hangs on the wall.
dakle, a obično u židovskom svijetu ketuva je uokvirena i visi na zidu.
I mean, it's a very beautiful document with artwork.
Dakle, to je jako zanimljivo djelo gdje ima jako lijepih likovnih uresa.
And it has the promises of both the bride and the groom.
I napisane su obećanja mladoženje, dakle i mlade.
But in the time of Jesus, it was a little bit more like a business contract.
A u vrijeme Isusa, dakle to je malo kasnije, bilo je nešto drugčije.
And so these negotiating and writing of the ketubim,
Dakle, to je bio kao pravni ugovor i oni su se našli da ga potpišu.
would happen in the evening.
I to je bilo uveče obično.
And when that was finished,
I kad su to završili,
the groom and his family and his friends,
mladoženja, njegova obitelj i prijatelji,
they would start going to the bride's house.
krenuli su dakle u povorci prema kući mlade.
Now the bride, she was a virgin.
Dakle, mlada je bila djevica.
She would have between 13 to 15 years of age.
Bila je između 13 i 15 godina.
Now, the other virgins of the village or town,
Dakle, a ostale djevice u gradu ili selu,
they would be her bridesmaids.
one bi bile djeveruše.
Now their job,
A njihov posao,
they were to have a lamp,
one su imali svjetiljku
and they would wait outside the door,
i čekale bi ispred vrata
and they would wait for when the groom and his men would have a parade coming towards them.
i čekale su mladoženju i njegovu paradu koja ide prema njima.
And so these virgins would grab their
I
lamps,
te djevice bi uzele lampe
and their job was to greet the groom.
kako bi iskazale dobrodošlicu onima koji dolaze.
They would sing and they would welcome the groom.
Pjevali bi i izrazili dobrodošlicu mladoženji.
As the groom would come to the bride's house,
Kada bi mladoženja došao do kuće mlade i pokucao
ask for the bride,
i zatražio mladu,
she would come out and she was beautiful.
ona bi izašla van i bila bi prekrasna.
But of course her face would be veiled.
No preko lica bi imala veo.
So then bride and groom together would walk.
Dakle, mladoženja i mlada bi hodali
They would walk under a canopy.
i iza njih bi bio kao zastor.
The groom would wear a crown,
On bi nosio krunu
and also the bride would have a crown over her veil.
i ona bi imala isto preko svoga vea krunu.
And under this canopy they would have this procession, a parade.
I dakle, tu bi bila ta velika i procesija i parada.
And they would go to the house of the groom and his family.
I ušli bi u kuću mladoženje i cijele njegove obitelji.
It would be the bride and the groom and his family and her family and these virgins.
Dakle, to je bilo i mladoženja, i mlada, i obitelj sa jedne strane, i sa druge strane, ali i ove djevice.
Then they would go inside and they would close the doors.
I onda bi ušli unutra i zatvorili bi vrata.
Because this was at night.
Jer to je bilo po noći.
And the doors would be locked.
I vrata bi bila zaključana.
Because all the guests who had been invited, they were already inside.
Jer svi gosti koji su trebali doći već su unutra.
And the wedding party, it was already inside.
Dakle, i cijela zabava je unutra.
And that's it.
I to je to.
The door is locked.
Vrata su zaključana.
In this story,
U ovoj priči,
Jesus uses Jesus tells of it's a possible scenario. It's plausible.
Isus govori o mogućnosti da se to stvarno dogodi u stvarnom svijetu.
But it would be hard to imagine
No bilo bi teško za zamisliti
that some of these girls, these 10 virgins,
da jedna od tih djevica, od tih 10 djevica,
would be so foolish as to not be prepared.
da bi bila toliko budalasta da bude nepripremljena.
If they were all assembled together, they know for the purpose that they're together.
Jer ako su se zajedno okupile, pa valjda znaju svrhu zbog koje su se okupile.
Their job is to welcome the groom.
Njihova svrha je da učine dobrodošlicu mladoženji.
They are the maids, they are to serve the bride.
One su sluškinje, one su one koje će služiti mladu.
And they must be ready for the groom at any time.
I moraju biti spremne za mladoženju bez obzira koje je to vrijeme bilo.
And it's very possible
I vrlo je moguće
that the negotiations between the groom and the bride's family could take a long time.
da će pregovori trajati jako dugo između mladoženja i obitelji mlade.
So even though maybe it would be typical, say, by 7 o'clock,
Do 7 navečer otprilike
it could be much later.
bi bilo gotovo, ali moglo bi se i otegnuti još duže.
It could be midnight till he comes.
Moglo bi ponoć biti čak dok on ne dođe.
And so that's possible and they should be prepared for that.
Dakle, to je moguće i sve bi trebale biti spremne za to.
half of these girls were prepared,
U priči pola ovih djevojaka, djevica su bile spremne.
and the other half were not.
Pola nisu.
Because when the call came, here comes the groom,
I kada su povikali, evo dolazi mladoženja, zaručnik,
these girls who had been waiting a long time,
te djevojke su čekale jako dugo.
and who had fallen asleep,
I zaspale su.
woke up,
No u tome trenu su se probudile,
grabbed their lamps,
uhvatile svjetiljke
trimmed the wick, the light,
i upalili ih.
but suddenly the five were like, we don't have enough oil.
No neke su rekli, gledaj, pa nemamo dovoljno ulja.
It's been too long.
Pa predugo smo čekale.
They say, give us some of your
Daj
oil.
nam malo vašega ulja.
And the other girls say, you're crazy.
A ostale djevojke su rekle, pa vi ste lude.
Why would we do that?
Zašto bismo mi to napravili?
Go buy some oil quickly.
Idite brzo u dućan i kupite ulja.
And so they run to buy oil.
I trčale su da kupe ulja.
But by that time, the groom has come.
Ali u to vrijeme dolazi zaručnik, mladoženja.
The bride comes out.
I mlada izlazi.
Procession goes to the groom's home.
I procesija slijedi do zaručnikove kuće.
They go in and the door's locked.
Ulaze unutra i vrata se zaključavaju.
It's too late for these girls.
I za one djevojke sada
The 5 foolish virgins.
to je 5 budalastih djevica.
Why? Why did this happen?
Zašto se to dogodilo?
Were they immature?
Jesu li bile nezrele?
Were they spoiled girls from rich families, from wealthy
Jesu li
families?
bile razmažene jer su bile u bogatim obiteljima?
Were they thoughtless?
Jesu li bile bezumne?
Why were they not prepared?
Zašto nisu bile spremne?
Because they did not take this seriously.
Jer nisu svoj posao, svoj zadatak uzele ozbiljno.
Yes, they believed in the groom.
Da, vjerovali su zaručnika da će doći.
They believed in the wedding.
Vjerovali su svadbu,
They believed it was all going to happen.
vjerovali su da će se sve to dogoditi.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have been there.
A da su bile mudre, ne bi bile tamo.
They could have been at home instead.
Mogli su onda otići doma ako nisu vjerovali u to.
So they had the information,
Dakle, znali su sve,
they had the knowledge,
imali su znanje.
but they did not take it seriously.
No nisu to uzele zaozbiljno.
How can that be?
Zašto je tomu tako?
There's the tragedy that when they tried to come in
Tragedija u tome da kad su probale ući unutra,
was that the groom said, I don't know you.
jest da je zaručnik rekao, ja vas ne poznajem.
He was right to say that
Imao je pravo to reći.
because they were the same as strangers to him.
Jer su njemu bile strankinje.
They knew about the wedding,
One su znale za svadbu,
but by their behavior, they showed that they did not have a relationship with the wedding party.
ali po svojem ponašanju su dale do znanja da nemaju nikakve veze sa tom svadbom.
Their behavior was like that of a stranger.
Ponašali su se kao stranci.
Unfortunately, in the history of the church,
Nažalost, u povijesti crkve,
and even today,
čak i danas,
there are people who say that they're Christians.
ima ljudi koji govore da su kršćani.
And sometimes they come to church.
I nekada dođu u crkvu.
And in the church, no matter which church it is,
I u crkvi, bez obzira koja je to crkva bila,
even if the gospel of Jesus is not actively proclaimed,
i čak ako se evanđelje ne proklamira aktivno,
you can still see and hear it
ipak ga možeš čuti i vidjeti
in the scripture readings
u čitanjima iz Svetoga pisma,
and in the Apostles' Creed.
u apostolskom vjerovanju.
It's still present,
Dakle, još uvijek je prisutno.
even if it's not proactively preached.
Iako nije propovijedano.
It's still present.
Ipak je tu prisutno.
You cannot say that you are a Christian and not be exposed to this good news.
Ne možete reći da ste kršćani, a da niste dio te radosne vijesti.
The good news is
Dobra vijest jest
that God notices you,
da vas Bog prepoznaje, vidi
and he loves you,
da vas voli
and he wants you to have a relationship with
i da
him.
želi da vi imate odnos s njim.
But he also knows that you have a problem. I have a problem.
Ali on također zna da vi imate problema u životu.
We have a problem.
Svi mi imamo problem.
We are traitors.
Mi smo izdajice.
Can you trust someone who is a traitor?
Možete li vjerovati nekome tko je izdajica?
No.
Ne.
Can you trust an unfaithful spouse?
Možete li vjerovati suprugu ili supruzi koji su nevjerni?
Of course not.
Naravno da ne možete vjerovati.
The human race, all of humanity,
Ljudska rasa, svo čovječanstvo
is in that situation.
jest u toj situaciji.
We are unfaithful to God.
Mi smo nevjerni Bogu.
We commit treason to God,
Mi smo prevarili Boga.
or treason against God. This is what the Bible calls sin.
To je ono što Biblija kaže da je to grijeh.
That is what sin is. It is disobedience,
To je grijeh, kad smo neposlušni. To je grijeh.
and it is treason.
To je izdaja.
And of course, you cannot have a relationship with that situation.
I naravno da ne možeš imati sa drugom osobom odnos onda ako si izdao.
But because God sees you, He notices you, He loves you,
Ali zato što te Bog vidi i zna da si tu i volite
and He knows what you need,
i zna što ti trebaš,
He offers His Son.
on nudi svoga sina.
He sent Jesus into this world
Poslao je Isusa na ovaj svijet
to live the life that none of us are able to live,
da živi život kakav ni jedan od nas nije sposoban živjeti.
as well as to die the death that we deserve to die,
I isto tako da umre onom smrću kojom smo mi zaslužili umrijeti.
which He did.
Što je napravio.
But the amazing thing is He came back to life,
Ali nevjerojatno je to što je ponovo živio.
and all of that is so that we can be right with God.
I to samo zato da mi možemo biti u dobrim odnosima sa Bogom.
The only way we can be right with God
Jedini način da budemo u dobrim odnosima sa Bogom
is if Jesus becomes our substitute.
jest ako Isus postane naša zamjena.
If He trades places with us,
Ako zamijeni mjesta s nama.
He takes our punishment
On će preuzeti na sebe našu kaznu
and He gives us His righteousness.
i nama će dati svoju pravednost.
So our sin is taken away,
Dakle, sav naš grijeh je oduzet.
and it is exchanged. It is in place of it is given righteousness,
I u zamjenu za to smo dobili njegovu pravednost.
and this is what we need.
I to je ono što mi trebamo.
And this is good news.
I to je dobra vijest.
I cannot understand
Ja ne razumijem
how anyone can hear this
kako bilo tko može ovo čuti
and not take it seriously.
i ne uzeti zaozbiljno.
Unless, of course, they don't take God seriously.
Osim naravno ako ne uzimaju Boga zaozbiljno.
How can they not take Jesus serious?
Kako ne mogu uzeti Isusa zaozbiljno?
I mean, the information is all around us,
Informacije su svuda oko nas.
both in the church and outside the church.
I u crkvi i izvan crkve.
Jesus is a real historical figure.
Isus je prava povijesna ličnost.
It is undisputed. There is no dispute.
To se ne može pobiti.
Jesus lived and died.
Isus je živio i umro.
And we have historical evidence that he rose from the dead.
I imamo povijesne dokaze da je uskrsnuo od mrtvih.
And despite the historical evidence,
I usprkos tim povijesnim dokazima,
some people still do not take Jesus seriously.
neki ljudi ipak ne uzimaju Isusa zaozbiljno.
They do not take seriously what Jesus did.
Ne uzimaju zaozbiljno ono što Isus napravio.
And so they're like these virgins.
I zato su poput ovih budalastih djevica.
They knew all about this wedding.
Znale su za tu svadbu,
They had the knowledge,
imale su znanje,
but they didn't take it seriously.
no nisu svadbu uzeli zaozbiljno.
And this is such a tragedy.
I to je takva tragedija.
Jesus does not want that for any of you,
Isus-
for any of us.
Isus ne želi da se to dogodi ikome od vas.
And so he gives us this parable.
I zbog toga nam daje ovu prispodobu.
And he warns us And he tells us to take him seriously.
I upozorava nas da ga uzmemo zaozbiljno.
And so what we do, we trust him as Savior,
Stoga kada mu vjerujemo kao našem spasitelju
and we call him Lord.
i zovemo ga Gospode,
And our lives change
da se naši životi mijenjaju
as we obey Jesus.
dok slušamo njegove zapovjedi.
How we live demonstrates,
Kako živimo, to demonstrira
it demonstrates what we really believe.
ono što uistinu vjerujemo.
How we speak,
Kako govorimo,
how we act,
kako djelujemo, kako se ponašamo,
how we react to others.
kako reagiramo na druge.
And also how the choices we make.
I naravno, koje odabire biramo, što biramo za nas u životu.
And so the invitation that God offers you
I stoga taj poziv koji vam Bog daje
is to come to him through his son Jesus
je da dođete do njega po njegovu sinu Isusu
and take this offer of life,
i da primite tu ponudu života.
what God offers you, a place in his family.
To što vam Bog nudi, mjesto u njegove obitelji.
He offers you relevance and meaning and purpose.
Daje vam značenje, smisao i svrhu.
He offers you a new heart.
Nudi vam novo srce.
A new heart in which he can pour his spirit and his love.
Novo srce u koje vam može dati svoga duha i svoju ljubav.
And give you real confidence and real...
I dati vam pouzdanje.
Yeah. So, this is the offer. And so, I ask you, please, will you take it seriously?
Dakle, to je ponuda, a ja vas molim da razmislite i da uistinu se primite te ponude, da ih prihvatite.
Amen.
Amen.